I always like to get another perspective on an organization in this show. And since we couldn't put a client at risk, as we all agreed, I spoke with one of your 100 pro bono lawyers. Allison Villano is an associate in the litigation department at Patton Boggs in Newark. Her concentration is defense of complex toxic tort, consumer fraud, and commercial matters. She's a graduate of Wellesley and Seton Hall Law and was honored by New Jersey Monthly last year as a rising star. Allison, I know you could have done your pro bono work at any number of organizations. What made you choose Partners for Women in Justice?
Well, for one, I had been living in Montclair for a number of years, which is where the organization is located. And another woman that I work with, who's also an attorney here at Patton Boggs, had heard of the organization, and we both were also interested in doing pro bono work for women and getting involved in cases that had issues that were relevant to women. I went to an all-women's college, and it just kind of was a natural choice. And I was really impressed when I read up on Partners for Women in Justice and when I spoke with Jane and Marcia Pavernak there. They were doing great work. It was a great mission, and it felt like an organization that in getting involved, you actually could really make a difference in women's lives and in their children's lives. And that's something that really spoke to me.
And how long have you been working with Partners?
It's a little bit over 3 years now.
Talk about what it is you do. How do you work with Jane and the team at Partners?
Well, you first have to go through training that Marcia and a couple other people provide. And once you've been trained on how to handle a domestic violence case and represent a woman in a final restraining order hearing, you are put on a list with Partners for Women in Justice. And as they get cases in, they reach out to you and see if you're available to take on the case. And then they do all of the intake, which is really helpful. They meet with the clients. They find out exactly what happened. They determine whether it's an appropriate case for us to be working on. And then I talk to whoever did the intake at Partners for Women in Justice. They send me over the paperwork, and then we kind of take it from there. We meet with the clients, we prepare them, and we represent them in court.
Talk about what kinds of cases.
They are all victims of domestic violence. They kind of run the gamut of really intense physical abuse and emotional and verbal abuse. Some is stalking and harassment. I've had a case where the victim was literally getting 20 to 25 phone calls a day from her ex-boyfriend. He was driving by her house, standing and parking outside her house. And while there was no physical abuse, she literally could not live a normal life. She was always looking over her shoulder. He was showing up everywhere she would go, harassing her, saying really horrible things. And we were able to get a final restraining order for her against him. Other women have been just physically abused for years, and they finally reach a breaking point where they need to get out. These are women often that don't have support from their families, they don't have support in their communities, and Partners for Women in Justice and then the attorneys that represent them are the ones that are really able to offer them this support and give them a voice in getting out of these relationships. What I've found, kind of really surprising, I actually met with a client last night, and she told me that she had never realized she was in an abusive relationship until she actually did some research on it on the internet and realized that being called horrible names and being told how stupid she was and how insignificant she was every day, that actually was abuse and that she didn't need to take it anymore. So it's women that are in really harmful relationships and that are in danger. A lot of times their lives are in danger that we're helping.
What do you find to be the most challenging aspect of this kind of work?
I think it's very draining and the emotional toll that it can take on you. It's hard sometimes not to get very engrossed and emotionally attached to these cases and to these women. You want to kind of jump into their lives and help them all the time and in everything that they do. It's also really sad seeing kids that, are witnessing their moms get hit and verbally abused, every day. And they're growing up thinking that that's normal behavior. It's really upsetting. It also can be upsetting to kind of see the system and how the system can fail these women. A lot of times police don't respond very quickly when they call for help, that it's very difficult sometimes for when in the past when they've tried to get a final restraining order on their own, and that can be frustrating and upsetting when you see that or that you feel like the system has been failing these women.
I would think that the parallel question is a lot easier. What is the most rewarding?
The most rewarding is when you succeed in getting a final restraining order, and that's usually kind of the first step that these women are taking in starting their lives over. And the joy that you see and the relief that you see in their eyes and on their faces, and knowing that they're not going to be in a bad situation anymore. It's their happiness. It's really different to represent a woman in this type of situation than some of the other work that I do on an everyday basis. It's really rewarding to have clients hug you and thank you. It's also, I think, rewarding when you have women, come in and tell you these horrible stories, and they ask you, is this abuse? I mean, should I be doing this? And for you to be able to tell them that they don't need to be in this situation, and that, yes, they are suffering abuse. And while it's really hard to say, when they see that someone is kind of validating what they believe is abuse and what they believe is a bad situation, to give them that validation is also rewarding.
Do you have any idea over the 3 years how many women you've worked with?
Maybe I've worked with 15 women.
15 changed lives.
I hope so.
How has working with partners changed your life?
One, I think it's given me a satisfaction in my job that I don't know I would have otherwise. It's given me a great professional experience. I'm in the courtroom, I'm arguing on my feet. It's for a cause I believe in. It's very rewarding, and it's also really, really exciting to see people like Marcia and Jane and everybody that works in partners so dedicated to a cause. It's inspiring, all the work that they're doing. So it's really given me a sense of fulfillment that I'm not sure I would have had working with another organization.
Well, Allison, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Jane, it's really exciting to think that you've got 100 Allisons you can reach out to. I mean, that puts it into perspective.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The pro bono attorneys who work for us are just terrific.
And Allison estimates that she's worked with about 15 women in the time she's worked with you. How many women do you think the organization has helped over the course of your 8 years of existence?
We have helped more than 2,000 women in more than 3,000 matters. And what that means is, what those numbers say, is that women can come back to us over time as their cases make their way through the court system. Mm-hmm. And a woman might first contact us for help with a restraining order, but there could well be subsequent hearings in connection with visitation, mm-hmm. custody, assessments of the risk to the children of unsupervised visitation with the father, child support, spousal support can be an issue, and they know that they can come back to us 2 or 3 years down the road. And it's interesting, some of them often say, I don't know if you remember me, but we always do.
And, we talked a little bit about where you get your financial support earlier. You were chosen from among 400 applicants to receive one of 15 grants from the Avon Foundation for Women not that long ago. Talk a little bit about what the grants allow you to do, and a little bit more about where you get all your funding.
We get about 40% of our funding from competitive grants, including this past year, the Avon Foundation. We also have been working closely with Seton Hall School of Law and Verizon. Verizon has funded a fellowship for a Seton Hall graduate to work out of our organization and specialize in handling domestic violence cases. We get funding from the United Way, from the Jewish Women's Foundation, from something called the IOLTA Fund of the Bar of New Jersey, which is a fund associated with interest on lawyers' trust account, and small family foundations. The A.F. Robbins Trust is one, and there are a number that wish to remain anonymous. But 60% of our funding comes from individuals and from law firms, particularly the law firms who participate in our pro bono programs. And we raise funds through our Spring Gala, which is coming up on April 26th, and also through our annual appeal. But we have some extremely generous donors who have been with us since we started, and sometimes their donations aren't very large, but they're consistent, and we really do appreciate them. So there's a whole host of people out there who are helping our clients.
Looking back over the years since you started Partners, what accomplishments are you proudest of, and where are you going in the future?
In terms of the accomplishments that I'm most proud of, I guess I have to look at that from two perspectives. One is what we do for our clients. And whenever I hear of a client, whether it's because of the work that an Allison Villano did, or one of our staff attorneys did, or one of our paralegals did, a client who has succeeded in making a better life for herself because of our work, that is what makes me most proud. We get lots of thank yous from our clients, and the theme that comes through is peace. One of them said to us recently, "Now when I put the key in the door when I come home from work, I don't have to wonder about what's going to happen on the other side of that door. I'm at peace, and so is my son." And that's priceless. On an organizational level, the thing that's most proud is that I'm most proud of is, I guess, building an organization that hopefully will exist when I'm gone. That's my goal. And I have a wonderful set of trustees who are really helping us move toward that.
And that brings me to another question. I mentioned to you earlier that I've had on the show a number of guests who are young, in their 20s. They've started not-for-profits, sometimes when they were in high school. Some of them have grown fairly substantially. And I know that many of them are champing at the bit to ditch the day job so they can just pursue their passion, which is the nonprofit that they've started. You were fairly far along in your career when you made that decision to start this. What kind of advice do you have for these budding DIYers who have something that they have started, they've gotten it off the ground, but now, they would really like to do nothing but this?
It's tough. Nobody goes into the not-for-profit world to make money. And in these economic times, it's even more challenging. But I guess I would say is choose your family and friends who are unquestionably supportive, and keep your eye on the dream that you have, and remember there is a way that it can be done. I'd say don't get discouraged. It takes time, and have a long view of it. If you can't quit a day job now, plan with your trustees and your other supporters how you will go about getting the organization to the point where you could do that, or you could pay somebody else to do that. There are other ways also to be involved if a person cannot afford to quit a day job. One could be a trustee of that organization and provide a lot of valuable input that way, or look to another organization to serve as a trustee during the time when you can't afford to quit your day job, and you'll get invaluable experience that you could use later on.
Well, if someone was interested in making a contribution or attending your gala or using your services, where can they find you?
We're on the web at www.pfwj.org, and there's information about donating on the web and about the Spring Gala.
You can learn more about Partners for Women in Justice also through the link at DIY World Improvement Facebook page. Feel free to friend us and like us. Partners for Women in Justice also is on Facebook. I always like to get another perspective on an organization in this show. And since we couldn't put a client at risk, commercial matters, she's a graduate of Wellesley and Seton Hall Law and was honored by New Jersey Monthly last year as a rising star. Allison, I know you could have done your pro bono work at any number of organizations. What made you...
We both were also interested in doing pro bono work for women and getting involved in cases that had issues that were relevant to women. I went to an all-women's college, and it just kind of was a natural choice. And I was really impressed when I
choose Partners for Women in Justice.
Well, for one, I had been living in Montclair for a number of years, which is where the organization is located. And another woman that I work with, who's also an attorney here at Pat and Boggs, had heard of the organization. And
Because we all agreed, I spoke with one of your 100 pro bono lawyers. Allison Villano is an associate in the litigation department at Patton Boggs in Newark. Her concentration is defense of complex toxic tort, consumer fraud, and commercial